Okay, the next piece that we have in our level collision generator, we now know that it's creating, and if I was running this, this tag would end up showing up that it's not creating it. So if I ran this, let's go ahead and run it to show that it's not doing it, that it's pulling them as ellipse. So we just need to get it to where it's getting to the render screen. Okay. So now let's see what the error was. Array out of bounds. Okay, that is a separate issue. That one can be fixed. What it's saying for the array out of bounds, it's saying that when it's trying to do my polyline, it's going out of my array. But this is what I was trying to point you to. Unrecognized map shape ellipse map object. Okay, because we're saying the object to string. So now we know that we have to deal for ellipse based on our creating our methods for pulling from tiled map. So if we go to polyline, the issue is that our vertices, when we're looking at tiled, it's doing, if I'm selecting this one, it's doing this point to this point, this point to this point, this point to this point. So I'm repeating the same point multiple times. So it's actually not going to be, that's why we are dividing by 2. We also need to divide by 2 here. Okay, so that will fix that issue. But now we know that we have to deal with the ellipse. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create another else if statement. So let's just go ahead and copy this. And I'm going to paste it. Okay. So we want it to be a instance of the ellipse map object, okay? And here we're creating circles. The reason why you don't want to create an ellipse is because Box2D does not support creating an ellipse for creating a Box2D body shape. So we are not going to be creating an ellipse. What we're really doing is we're going to test to see if that shape is actually a circle, and then we're going to, we can't generate it using the circle method, but we know that if we do have a circle, then when we're creating that ellipse, it's really creating a circle. So this is really not going to end up getting called. I could not get it called even though it's a circle, because you've seen that we resized the height and weight so it matched, and it's still called the ellipse. Okay, so the way that we can do that is we can say object dot get ellipse, and then we can do dot height. Ask if that object dot get ellipse dot width. If those are equal, then it's a circle. So we need to deal with that. We're then going to be creating that. Else, if it's not, then I really want to print this and find out what's going on, because then I have some ellipse that I need to deal with. Okay, so if we're in here, we're not going to call the ellipse. We're going to call a method that we haven't created yet that we call ellipse. This is going to be an ellipse map object. Okay. So this method, it says we need to create it. Let's go ahead and create it. Where's my little helper? There it is. Create that method. We want to return level geometry. Okay, and I'm going to call this ellipse map object. Okay, so in here, this is actually going to be really similar to how we're building a circle. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this and put it in here. Except here we're creating an ellipse. So we can create an ellipse, we just can't create an ellipse shape. Ellipse, and then this is going to be ellipse map object dot get ellipse. I want to import this. Okay, So the circle shape, we are creating that, but we know that that circle shape is actually going to be the ellipse, and it doesn't matter if I pull the height or not. I'm going to pull the height. Now the other issue, since this is the actual height, it's not the radius, my height or my width is actually my diameter, so I need to divide that by 2, okay, to end up having that set correctly. And then here I can do ellipse dot x and ellipse dot y. Okay, so that's correct. Now there's a couple more things that we need to do. We need to do the conversion, but what I wanted to point to is when we run this, our position's not going to be where we want it to be. We need it actually to be half, just like what we did here. We took the x value, we added half the width. For the position to be accurate, we need to do the same thing here. So we're going to do plus ellipse dot, let's just say height divided by 2. And let's keep it uniform since we're in x. Width divided by 2, and our y is going to be plus height ellipse dot height divided by 2. Okay, so now that should be pointing to our stuff. Let's go ahead and run, see where we're at. We still got the scaling issue that we got to deal with, but it should now not error out. Okay, we're in the main game render. It didn't freak out when it was building, but we still have that scaling issue. So our scaling issue, we can use all these private methods that we created and start scaling. So I'm going to click on my figures, and I'm going to create a new method public, or not a new method, a new variable, final variable, but I'm going to put it in float. And this is going to be my ppm, and I'm going to set it equal to 16. Okay, because I know that 16 pixels is what I'm drawing my sizes for. So I'm going to leave it at that. So now, not my main game screen, my level collision generator. Now everything that I have needs to get divided by any size that I'm passing in from tiled needs to get divided by the figures.ppm. So this x value, I'm going to do this, divided by figures.ppm. This ellipse for my y position is going to be divided by figures.ppm. One too many. Okay, so that's that piece. I'm doing the same thing here for all of them. I'm going through and I'm divided by figures.ppm. This is just to get it in the right scale before we pull it in. PM. Okay. 2 down. All right, so here our polygon. We actually don't need to do a log message. Okay, so here we are going to have to, those vertices, we're going to have to convert those. So I'm going to do a new float array that I'm going to call world vertices because we're converting it. And it's going to equal a new float array that is the same size as my vertices.length. Okay. So now I'm going to iterate through using my vertices.length as my max where I'm looking at world vertices at the I position is going to be equal to the vertices at the I position, but it's going to be divided by figures.ppm. And then my polygon is being set by world vertices. Okay, and my polylines, this, my X and my Y need to be also converted to scale. Figures.ppm. Okay, so it has that piece. My circle, radius divided by figures ppm, X divided by figures.ppm, and Y figures.ppm. Okay, so now if I run this, let's find out where that error is. Circle.x. Okay, now let's run this, see if it fixed our scaling issue for box 2D. Look at that. That looks beautiful. Okay, so it didn't push us out. And if I'm comparing with my map, so let's have this right on the top. Look up the position of my circle. It should look like it's relatively in the same position, which it does. If I go over, I should see that other circle and it should be sized right. The only problem is, camera's not following me. So we're going to have to try to deal with that. A quick way that we could do this just for testing before we do any custom type camera classes. In my main game, we create the player. We have a handle to the player. That means that we can get to its components that that player has. So here, and it's not normally a good idea to have a lot of stuff operating in your render. It all should be done beforehand and then get updated afterwards. Get updated and then get rendered all at once. But here is an easy way that we could quickly check our maps and then we know that we can change it later. So if I'm doing camera.position.set, I can pass in a vector 3 or a vector 2 and a float z variable. So if we can get to our box 2D body, we can pull a vector for its position and then just pass in a 0 for its z values or its z index. So let's go ahead and .set, and now what we're doing is we're doing player, and because it's Ashley, now we can get to our components as long as we're passing in the class. So this is the body, the box 2D body is stored in my body component. So I can get that, and now I can get the body and I can get its position. So that gives me my X and Y. I can now pass in a 0 for my Z. This is my position. Now if I update my camera, it now will update my position for where I am in my world. So now the camera is going to follow the player, and we can use this. See, now it's following. Okay. We should have consistent sizing. So if I drag this up, I should not get skewing. It should resize appropriately, which it is. That's what we want. Okay. So let's walk around. We should have interactions with everything because everything's a static body, but it's treated as the level, which is awesome. That's what we want. So that's another interaction because we're only using the level collision generator for one layer. we can create multiple pieces that are going to get generated from this. So this is my polyline that I did for that shape that is treated as one shape. So this is looking good. Okay, so the next pieces. This is only doing two of these, two of the units. So we need to actually resize that. Once you have a camera, for map renderer, all we got to do is we got to set the view. So we can do map renderer dot set view, and then we got to pass it in that camera. So I can say camera right here. I could also pass in, if I wasn't creating a camera but I still did my fit viewport, I could do my viewport, and then I could do get camera. I just have to cast it as an orthographic camera. Either one of these ways will work. Now when we run this, we're going to have still an issue, because since we had to scale the box 2D bodies, we're also going to have to scale what is drawn, because it's not going to be sized right. It doesn't know what our units are. So this is my border. See how big that is? That is huge. So we actually need to scale it down. So our map renderer, where we created it, right here, there's actually multiple ways we can pass in. So if I'm looking at my orthogonal tiled map render, we can pass in a map and a batch, or we can pass in a map, a unit scale, and a batch. So the unit scale is the way that we could size this. So it's map, unit scale, and then batch. So let's go ahead and we can scale it, but we're going to scale it by the figures.ppm. So that's really the only time that we need to use some type of conversion, because we're pulling it from outside information in and making it size properly to our world. Now when we run this, it should look pretty good. Bam. All right. So there is our map. It is ugly in all its glory, but it shows us that we got everything right in code that we needed to generate our boundaries, our maps, create our level entities. Okay. We can see that there's those boundaries. We have that debug view on. If we shut that off, we wouldn't really be able to see anything, but we'd still be able to interact. So for debug purposes, this is awesome. This is where we want to be. Now we'd be able to start tweaking our movements and making that custom for the player for what you want them to do. I didn't draw that one. So we have this. It's generating our texture for our map. It's generating the box 2D bodies. Okay. So outside of those errors, we're able to get it to where we want it to be. It is sizing properly. It's not skewing it. If I drag the size over, it's just putting the black bars where it needs to make sure that it's sized properly. So it's keeping everything using my fit viewport. It's keeping everything to scale. We don't end up having anybody who has a larger screen end up having an advantage. This is exactly what we want. Now we can start actually customizing to the player, doing the animations and all of that fun stuff. But now we got a whole pipeline set up for maps to go from tiled, from GIMP to tiled to our game. So all we got to do when we're ready to change our game is make sure that when we pass in our map for our tiled map renderer, which is here, we just have to change the map name. That's it. If we use different sizes than 16 pixels for a tile, we can just go to figures and we can just change that number. and everything else will convert exactly how it needs to be, and it will work fine. Okay? All right. Have fun. Good luck.